In today's video, we're going to be extending just a little bit how these enemies work by making the movement dynamic on the attacks, like this change there. We're going to add this Doom Scribe and this flying demon chest and all of their glory. So this is just going to be us exploring how to use the tools we've built up to this point to kill our player and make it harder for him to survive. So stay tuned and let's build something awesome together.
Hi, my name is Michael. Join me as we build an epic Metroidvania game in Godot 4 using GD script. This is the Metroidvania Forge.
All right, so today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to first start by showing you kind of the modifications I've made to the living armor so that we get that dynamic kind of movement during his attack. And then I've already built the demonic chest before I recorded, so I'm going to show you the implementation of the demonic chest as well. And I'll walk through and show the code, so if you want to pause the video and make some of the changes that you see there, you can. Okay, but I'm not going to go into quite as much depth as I normally do. I hope that most of the stuff I'm showing is self-explanatory if you've been following along with this chapter. But once I go through those two, we will go through and build this Doom Scribe together. So we'll create a new enemy scene. We'll build the decision engine and the new state that we need for him, and we'll get him all set up so that he works, including that curse or that magic spell attack that kind of follows the player around. All right, so we're going to build those. It'll be kind of quick at first, but then it'll be a little bit more detailed when we get to the Doom Scribe. So I hope that you guys like this style of video. Let me know if you don't, and I'll change it up in the future. But yeah, let's get going. All right, so first, let's look at a minor improvement that I've made with the living armor enemy here. And one thing that I wanted to support, but I didn't build in initially, was the ability for his attack to have some movement to it, because the description that Robzon had provided with this enemy when he designed him was that his attack would cause him to kind of charge forward briefly, okay? And so I'm going to show how that looks as I've implemented it here in the game. So we've got our enemy over here. And you can see that when he attacks, he's got that forward movement. And it's kind of timed. It's like at the middle of the attack. And you would think that maybe I'm doing that with the animation player, but that really wouldn't jive well with the dynamic nature of the enemy, right? Because if he's changes direction, the animation player is going to animate him based on a fixed position. Maybe that just doesn't quite work. And so what I've done with this is I've updated the enemy attack state, and you can actually see this move speed. We had a move speed initially built in, so he would have a constant speed, but I've added this move speed curve. So we're using a curve to help dictate how that move speed gets applied. And I'll go ahead and just show you this. You can see I'm using kind of like a simple curve with ranges of 0 to 1 and 0 to 1 on both axes. So what that means is, you know, like a 1 on the y-axis would be full movement speed, or in the case of this particular enemy, 100. And here where it's at 0, that means none. So, and then on the x-axis, this is kind of like the time ratio. And this is normalized. So the length of the attack may be longer or shorter than 1 second, but we just apply this based on that ratio, that normalized value. Okay. So you can see he has no movement, and then at 0.5 halfway through the attack, suddenly he gets full movement, and that tails down to this point here, which is at, looks like 0.9. So 90% of the animation complete, or the state complete. And so what that does is obviously he's not moving until about halfway through the attack. And let's go ahead and look at the script to see how we've implemented this. Now up top, I've added a new move speed curve. Okay, this is a special type of curve. It'll give you this type of export value here. And just to point out, you can adjust the minimum and maximum of the X and Y if you decide you want to, okay? And then down here, I've still got this assignment of the X velocity. So if you don't use a movement speed curve, it'll still just work like it used to work previously. But then when we go down to our physics update, I've added a little bit more code here. So I've got this if move speed curve, meaning if we've assigned a curve, then we know we want to use it, right? So what I'm going to do is I've got this variable afloat, and it's called sample. I'm just using that to get the sample of the move speed curve at the given time. And so we already have the information we need to determine kind of where we are in the timing of this attack. We have a duration and we have a timer, and we're constantly increasing the timer. So When this state enters, then timer will be 0. So 0 over, in this case, the duration is based off of the animation name. And I think it's like 1.4 seconds for this enemy, right? In fact, we could pull that up. Yeah, 1.4. So at the beginning it's 0, and by the time this animation gets to the very end, then it'll be 1.4 over 1.4, which will equal 1. Okay, so that's how this sample kind of relates to that curve. Let me pull that curve up again so you can see it. Okay, so 0 to 1. Now, alternatively, you could make it so that you just sample based on the time of the animation, and you can avoid this math. And then you just have to make sure you update your curve to have like a maximum domain. You can increase the domain, right? So you would have to manually change that to 1.4. Okay, so then you know this is the full length of the animation. That might be easier for some. I'm going to let you decide how you want to implement that, but I'm keeping it 0 to 1. And then what we're doing is after we sample that multiplier, this is essentially a multiplier. It's either 0 to 1. You could even increase the value minimum and maximum. Okay, in fact, I'll do that on another enemy here today. But you can see that we're just setting our X velocity based on the move speed multiplied by the sample. Okay, so it's going to sample this over time. And then we'll multiply that by the direction to our player. Okay, so that's pretty much all it is. It's just this little bit of code here, and that will allow us to apply this move speed animation according to our curve. So once again, just to show the effect here, we've got our enemy, and he just does that nice attack. Now, if I were to come in here and adjust this curve to be something like this, you can see he starts at 0.5, then he's going to get faster and slower. This is going to look kind of weird, but I just want to demonstrate a little bit how this curve works. So let's get our enemy facing us again. Yeah, you see how he kind of was moving at half speed and then full speed. Kind of weird. I wouldn't recommend doing that, obviously, unless the particular enemy called for it. And you could even increase or decrease these magnitudes. So maybe instead of starting at 0.5, maybe we want our minimum value to be less. Let's set -1. So we could actually set this down to -1. I'll just demonstrate this here. So he's going to start going in negative direction, and then he'll go forward. And in this case, we probably want him to go forward twice as fast. Otherwise, he's not going to clear that distance very well. Okay, let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Okay, so we've got a minimum, we've got a -1 and a +2 that it's going to curve between. All right, you see how he backed up and then he swung forward. Okay, so you can use this curve to do a whole lot with the movement of this, and then you don't have to rely on trying to make the animation player work, and it's a lot more dynamic than setting a simple flat value for the animation on that enemy. Okay, next I want to show you another flying enemy I've implemented here, and this is, you can see him coming into the screen now. This is the demonic chest, which was submitted by Harmless Trust. This was part of the enemy design showcase, and you can see that this enemy can move in different directions. He can fly around. He can pass through the one-way platforms from the top and the bottom. Okay, and then he's got an attack that's using more or less what I showed with that living armor, right? He kind of scoots back a little bit and then flies at the player. Okay, so let's look at how I set up this enemy. He's going to be pretty straightforward. Here he is. Let's go ahead and open the scene. Now you can see in here that I've got a state machine and I've got some unique states. I've got a fly state, a fly chase state, and a fly attack state. And then I've chosen to use the existing stun and death states for this enemy. Though if you wanted to, you could set up unique death or stun states for flying enemies. And then he's also got a decision engine called DecisionEngineFlying. Okay. Now this decision engine is basically the same as the regular attacking enemy, to be honest. But I've cleaned it up. You'll notice that I have all of the potential states as export variables, so I've assigned them manually. And just looking at this, I've got the sprite put in here. You can grab this. I'll put a link to the collection from the Metroidvania Forge Enemy Design Showcase, so you can hop over there and you can find this Demon Chest sprite if you would like to, and download it and let Harmless Trust know. And again, for Robzon, who I've used a couple times so far in this series, you can find that there as well. What this enemy is doing is pretty straightforward. I've got the basic animations and I've named them maybe somewhat appropriately. We've got a fly animation. We've got a chasing animation, okay, where his eyes are open, and all the stuff that we need. And we didn't really have a specific death animation for this enemy, so I've just made him fade out. And then also, I guess here's the attack animation. You can see, oops. Let's go to reset first. I had him fade out, so I couldn't see him. Okay, so the attack animation, he just kind of flaps his wings a little bit, and then he does that mouth thing, right? But I'm not moving him here. And what you'll see is in our fly attack, we've got the same kind of pattern. I've got a speed curve and a speed, and what'll happen is, his movement will get applied according to this curve. And you can see I'm starting this one at negative 0.25 up to 1. Okay, so he'll start going backwards just a little bit, and then he'll go full speed and slow back down. Okay, that's what that curve is going to do. And we saw that in the game, right? Now, let me just kind of step through what I've set up for this character. This decision engine for flying is extremely simple. In fact, like I mentioned, it's basically the same as the other decision engine that we have on our other enemies. And you can see that I'm just checking. The usual checks up here are quite important, right? To make sure that if he's recently taken damage, does he need to go into the death state or the stun state? And if he's in the death state or he's currently unable to decide, then we'll just return null. And then otherwise, here's all of the logic to make this guy work. We still have a can attack function. We have, returning the attack state or the chase state. So if we have a target, then we're chasing. If we can attack, we're attacking. And otherwise, we're using the simple move state, okay? And you can see up here, I've exported all of these different states. Okay, so they can be used kind of interchangeably. You could drop any state you want into the spot of these, and then the state machine or the decision engine, will pick up the proper state, okay, based on how you assign them. Okay, so again, showing I've got fly in both the idle and the move state. So when he's idling, he's still flying. Because I just didn't want to build an idle. I didn't have any good idea of what to do with it. But it could maybe just be like the fly state with no speed. I don't know. But I don't really have idle programmed into this as well. So, it would just be maybe an extra condition that we would add. But I don't have a lot of use for an idle state in this game. I think for most of my enemies, I probably won't. But you can see chase state, attack state, stun, and death. All right. Now I want to look at these special fly states because what's different? You're probably wondering, well, why have a fly state? Why not just use the move state? And the simple answer is because we need to move in the X and the Y directions, okay? And looking at the fly state, it looks a lot like my walk state that I have on my regular enemies, okay? We're still playing an animation when we start. We're still setting limits if we have them, okay? I didn't implement that in this level, but you could if you wanted to. So here's that set limits function. And then really the difference is in our update. You can see here, normally we're setting the velocity X. In fact, why don't I pull up my living armor's walk state and we can compare, okay? So here in the walk state, you can see we're doing enemy velocity X is equal to the walk speed multiplied by the blackboard direction. Now, in our fly state, we're setting the vector 2. So this is the X and Y values of the velocity based on the speed times the blackboard direction and 0. Okay. Now, this is interesting because the blackboard direction is just an X value. And so let's open that up so we can see it. Okay. So yeah, direction is always just, and it's basically the X direction. Okay. So in our fly state, when we're not flying towards the player, for example, then we're just moving left or right. Now, this could be altered so that in his regular flying state, he could move up and down, in which case you would just have to manually calculate the direction, which is going to look a lot like we have in our, in this fly chase state. Okay, so here in the fly chase state, this is even simpler. All I'm doing is I'm calculating a direction. See, this is a vector 2 instead of an X coordinate. And here I'm just going to grab my global position and go direction 2, and then I'll get the target's global position. Okay. So this will give us a direction that includes X and Y coordinates. And then I'm making sure to update the change direction here. I'm going to get the sign of the X value of this direction because our change direction is just left and right. But then for our velocity, we're going to set it based off of that, both the X and the Y, okay? So that's why when we enter the chase state, suddenly this chest is going to start following the player, okay? So we can see if, he already entered it. You can see okay, there we go. He's idle again, or just regular walking. Now, if I jump up here, he's going to come at me. And you can see now he'll move up and down as needed, okay? He can move straight up. He can move straight down. That attack is kind of obnoxious, isn't it? All right. So that's how that works. And if you wanted to apply this kind of logic to your regular flying state, you totally could. In fact, you could even utilize the limits and maybe allow it to have more than two. Maybe you make it an array of limits, and then you could just make him fly, because you could get the X and the Y coordinates of those limits and just have him fly between them or something like that, okay? And that's going to be one of the homework assignments. If you're building a flying enemy, then figure out how you can get him to fly to different points, and then update your fly state accordingly so that he's now utilizing X and Y movement on his velocity. Now, the last thing that we have is this attack, the fly attack. And it's basically, again, the same as my regular attack, but instead of having only on the X coordinate, we're going to do X and Y. So I do have a speed curve in here. And in this case, I've moved my sample out of scope. Previously with the regular attack state, that sample was happening just kind of in the physics process. But here I decided to move it out so that I could reuse it as needed. And another thing that's different with this flying attack state is I'm not setting the movement velocity in the enter function. I just coded it a little bit differently, and I think it's a little bit more elegant. So instead, what I'm doing is in my physics update, the usual here, I'll get a speed curve sample. Okay, if we have a speed curve, then I'm going to set the speed sample. And this is why I decided to move it out of scope, okay? So that I could just assign it anytime I needed to. So I get a speed sample if needed, and then I calculate the direction. And you can see here, I'm always trying to fly him towards the target's global position. An alternative to this could be, because this means that he'll move as the player moves, even if he's attacking. Okay, so this is going to be pretty smart. But if you have an enemy that dashes just in a straight line, then you're going to want to record this direction in the enter function and then only calculate it once. So he's just moving from point A to point B regardless of where the player goes. But in this case, because I've put it in here in the physics update, that means each physics tick he's going to be recalculating the direction to the player. Okay, so you can just choose to use that how you want. And then we're still changing the direction. And again, we're just passing in the sign of the X direction. And then here we go. Just set the velocity based off of the direction, multiply it by our speed and by the speed sample. Now, it is important to note that I set the speed sample by default to 1. So if you do not assign a speed curve to this enemy, then he's just always going to move at whatever that movement speed is, right? Because you're just going to be multiplying by 1. Okay, but otherwise, you're updating your speed sample each frame of the state, and so you're going to get that dynamic movement. And then again, I've got can attack, which is simple, just distance to target. None of this stuff changed. Okay, so there we have it. That's how I built this guy. A few other important things to note. Looking at the character body on this, you can see I've turned off collision masking for layer 2, which is our one-way platforms. So this enemy will only collide with regular ground, not with two-way platforms. Okay, that's how I got him to fly through those. It just completely ignores them altogether. And pretty straightforward and pretty simple. Okay, and I think it's pretty cool because he's a pretty dynamic feeling enemy with pretty simple code. I actually think I need to make it so that maybe I calculate that target direction at the beginning of the state instead of constantly throughout. Because you'll notice him doing some weird little whoosh, flying around and tracking the enemy. Nice. Got some health back. Okay. So this is how I've been implementing these state machines and decision engines with my enemies. And obviously, I'm still sticking to really simple decision engines. And I think some of you out there have maybe already gone past this, and that's awesome. That's exactly what I want you to do. And for those of you who haven't, then this is the time to jump in and get a little bit brave maybe and just try it out. Okay, so let's kind of take what I've just been kind of exhibiting and showing you here, and let's build one more enemy for this before I kind of put this chapter to bed. So what I want to do is I want to take one other submission from the enemy design showcase and build an enemy based on that. And so for this particular enemy, I haven't decided yet. We'll decide this as we go. So we're going to have to decide, do we need a new decision engine? Can we use one that we've already got? And then do we need to build any new states? And maybe along with that, this particular enemy that I've chosen has something that's kind of like a ranged attack. And so we're going to have to be able to handle that as well. So we'll kind of get into how we're going to tackle each of those pieces as we go forward. So the enemy I've decided to go with for this is this Doom Scribe, because he was one of the more standout designs. And he's also different, right? Because he's got this attack where he kind of charges it up or curses the player. And if the player doesn't defeat the enemy before the attack goes through, then there's really no way for him to avoid taking the damage. But maybe if we kill this enemy before the spell finishes, then maybe the spell dissipates and the player won't take any damage. Okay. So again, this will be linked. If you want to go grab this, then you can come here to Dr. Dolesville's page and grab the Doom Scribe. And thank you, Dr. Dolesville, for this submission. Okay, now I'm going to take this demonic chest and I'm actually going to make a copy of him. I'm just going to do it right here and we'll call him, Doom Scribe. Like so. And I've already created a Doom Scribe folder, so I'm just going to take the Doom Scribe and drag him over. Okay. Now you can see in here, I've got the Doom Scribe PNG as well as the ability, which is like the magic spell. So I'm going to use both of those. So let me go ahead and open the Doom Scribe and let's start by swapping out the sprite. Okay. So this sprite, I'm going to clear it. Doom Scribe. Let's plop this guy on there. Now I also had to scale this -1 on the X so that it worked with my directionality, but I don't think I need this. Doom Scribe should be facing right by default. Okay, so I'm going to clear that. Okay, now obviously you can see his head's poking up here. I don't have the correct frame settings on, so let's take a look at this. This is 6 across and 5 down, so we've got 6 columns or 6 horizontal frames and 5 vertical. There we go. So now our Doom Scribe is positioned or looking better. I'm going to go ahead and position him just like that. Okay. And we're going to need to set up animations. So I'm going to come into the animation player and I'm going to set these up right now. Oh, hold on. What happened? Oh, I need to reset the scale. I need to save that. Okay, I'm not sure why the scale is getting. Oh, I've got the scale keyframe to my reset. I'm going to trash that and the modulate there that I had. And I'm going to go through, do any of these? Which one uses these? It's probably the death. Yeah, let's go ahead and clear these off of here. Okay. Downside of duplicating another enemy scene is that sometimes you bring over stuff you don't want, right? So I'm going to come back here to my sprite and reset the scale one more time. There we go. And just save that. Okay. So coming to our animation player, one thing that I really liked about this Doom Scribe enemy is that Dr. Dolesville provided some information about a sprite sheet, including like what frames are used for each animation. So that's going to make it pretty easy. I'm on the death animation, so I'm going to go ahead and just do that one first because I'm here. And I'm going to delete this keyframe. Just make sure yours is set up like mine if you want to follow along. I've got a 0.1 second per frame, and I've got my snapping to timeline turned on. Okay. So if we delete that and come to the sprite, then what I can do is I can just kind of key in the frames real quick. And his death animation starts on frame 16. So, hey, look at that. I'm on frame 16. What are the chances? And then I'm just going to key this until it's done. Okay. I think it's done. Doesn't look like anything else is happening, right? Okay. So he kind of melts into the floor, which is nice. There is a stun. I think it's a single frame. Let me check. Yeah, he's got just one frame for his stun. So stun should be frame 15. So I'm just going to set that. Call it good. Okay, cool. Now there's really only 2 other animations. There's an idle and an attack. And because I copied one of my flying dudes, I've got some weird things. I'm going to go to chase and I'm going to delete this animation or remove it. And then let me come down here to fly and let me rename it to idle. Okay, and let's set up this idle animation, which is going to be the very first one. So this is going to be frames 1 through 6. which technically is 0 through 5, I guess, right? So did I get them all? Yeah, I got one extra even, maybe. So this is already set to looping, so let's go ahead and preview it. There we go. You know, I think I kind of want to slow this one down. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and double the timeline of this and select these. Go to Edit, Scale Selection, and I'm going to just do 2. Okay, so that'll double the length of each frame. And there we go. I really love the bobbing scroll on this. Did a really good job with that. Okay, so there's our idle animation, and then we need his attack animation. Now, we're not going to need this attack area activation, so we don't even need an attack area on this guy because he doesn't, right? He doesn't attack with an attack area. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete that. He'll still have this hazard area, okay, which you can see right here. We'll configure that momentarily. So if you run into him, you'll take damage, but his attack is going to be this more ranged kind of an attack, or it's a spell or a curse. Now this casting is frames 7 to 14, so let's go ahead and set that up. Which, is it going to be 7 or is it going to be 8? Yeah, 7, I guess. And then obviously you can see if I go one more, that's him taking damage. Okay, so now this one, I think what we're going to do is we're going to set this on loop because I think this should loop while the little attack is playing out. So I'm going to turn on animation looping. We don't normally do that for an attack animation. And so what we're going to have to do is we're probably going to have to create a custom state for this so that we can build it and time it out like we need to. So he'll just sit here like this, writing on his scrolls while this spell is happening. Okay. But there we go. We set that up. I'm going to go ahead and let's see. Let's get rid of these fly states. We've got stun and death. We can keep those in there. I'm going to set the knockback strength on these to 0, so he kind of stays stationary. And I'll leave that sound effect in there. This player sensor, you see I've made it a circle for that one guy. I'm going to keep it the same way. And I'm going to kind of assume actually that this guy is like omniscient and he's going to be pretty smart. So I'm going to position this centered. So even if he's not looking at you, he will sense you, is how that's going to work. And then let's see here. I'm going to turn off the audio sensor for him so that we have to enter that circle. Damage area. Here's the damage area. This was on that demonic chest before. So I'm going to just decrease this and make it taller. And then for the hazard area, this shape where if you run into it, you take damage. I'm going to make it pretty narrow, like so maybe, and scale that up like so. Okay. And there we go. Collision shape. Oh yeah, this collision shape should be something different. He's not going to be moving, so it's not super important, but yeah, let's see. There we go. That's a decent collision shape. Whatever. That'll work. And then lastly, we're not going to have... I'm going to turn on mask for 2, but I'm going to keep him... See, I've got affected by gravity turned off. That's one thing I didn't mention for the demonic chest. That's actually really important. Turn affected by gravity off, otherwise he'll fall, right? Okay, so we've got this set up. He's got 3 health. Sure. Let's make it 2 for this one. And now we've got a fully configured enemy, as far as I can tell. We do need to deal with the state machine and the decision engine at this point. I'm going to go ahead and remove this flying decision engine. And actually, I'm going to start by using, I think, just the regular basic attack decision engine. So I'm going to do a Control A. I'm going to use, basic attack. This was the one that we used for the living armor. And we can assign an attack and a chase state, okay? Okay, let's look at this basic decision engine. Now you can see that we can assign, we have export variable for the attack and the chase state, and then it's looking for walk, stun, and death. Okay, so let's make sure we have that. Let's add a walk state, so that's ES walk. Okay, I'm going to just add that in there. And I'm going to just set the walk speed to 0, which means he won't actually move, okay? Which is kind of funny, but that'll work. Now, for the chase state, I'm actually going to just come into this decision engine and I'm going to just assign this walk state for chase. He's not actually going to ever chase. Okay. Now what we do need is the attack state. So what we're going to do, the attack state needs to be something of ES attack. Okay. So in order for this to work and in order for us to customize it, I'm going to create like a copy of the attack state or a new script that extends attack state and maybe just does a couple things a little bit differently. So I'm going to create a new script here in my enemy states. Okay. So create new script, and I'm going to call this ES_attack_spell. Now this might be too generic, but I'm going to run with it. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete all of this. I'm going to give it a class name and ES_attack_spell. And this is going to extends ES attack. Okay. That way it can be used by this decision engine, right? Because this decision engine expects something that has ES attack. So let's go back to this ES attack spell script. Now, because we're extending ES attack, that means it's going to have everything that has. So let me go ahead and close some of this. Oops, I accidentally closed my spell state too. I didn't want to do that. Okay, so here's the attack spell. And here's the regular attack. So we're going to have all of these values. We're going to have this timer cooldown. And technically, we've got all of this stuff. Okay. So really what we need to do is we need to make it so that this attack state can now spawn a spell that will target the player. That's really the main difference, because I think this attack state is robust enough to do everything else. So I'm going to save this. And I'm going to go ahead and add an instance of this. So ES attack spell. It didn't get the icon, but that'll come in when we restart the project. Okay, so this attack spell, you can see it's got all the stuff. Attack range, cooldown, and I think we make the attack range pretty large. Like, let's go with 300 for now. Cooldown, I think the cooldown, sure, 3 seconds sounds fine. We don't need to assign an attack area because we don't have one. The move speed will be 0. Okay. And we don't need a move speed curve. Now we can give it an animation name, but we do have an animation called attack, right? Isn't that what we left it as? Yeah. So it's going to play that by default. That's how that state is set up to work. If we add one of these to our level, let's go to playground. And I'm just going to drag in a Doom Scribe. I'm going to just stick him up here. I'm going to take this demonic chest. I'm going to just move him over here for fun. Okay, so this Doom Scribe, let's actually put him, where are we at? Did I move the, I did, I moved the demonic chest again. Okay, so, oh, it's confusing because I have a Doom Scribe. I didn't rename the scene. This should be Doom Scribe. Yeah, if you make a copy of a scene, you got to get all these little things. Otherwise it gets messy. Okay, so now we delete that one and let's add him again. There we go. Doom Scribe. Okay. So I'm going to add the Doom Scribe just a route here so that the player's not within range. And let's go ahead and see what happens. When I approach him, he should begin playing his animation. Uh-oh. I got a bug. What is this bug? What am I on here? Enemy stun state. Okay, why is it already calling the stun state? Regardless, let's come in here. Let's look at our Doom Scribe. We've got our stun state. Okay. Oh, look at that. Not finding walk, stun, death. I don't have, let's put this in here real quick. Let's make sure that's not what's causing it. I didn't assign the attack state. Okay. Okay, still the same errors. I'm not sure why it's even trying to start with, oh, because the stun state's the first one. Let's put walk up here. And let's run one more time. There we go. That fixed that. It looks like there's still some debugger errors. We'll get to that in a second. But we see our dude here. I don't see him animating. But once we got close, you can see he started to do that attack animation, which loops. And animation missing walk. Okay, okay. Fair enough. We don't have a walk animation. We've got idle. So what we'll do for walk is we'll set this to idle. Stun, death, attack. Okay. What other errors are we getting? We're still getting this. Oh, I need to make sure I set these as access by unique name. That's what it is. Okay. I should probably make this a little bit cleaner. This is why I think I prefer what I did with the demonic chest, where in this decision engine, you have to manually assign each state, because then you can see which ones aren't getting assigned pretty easily, right? But there we go. That should clear those errors, though. Muy bien. Okay, so he's idling, or he's playing the idle animation. He's in the walk state. Okay, and you can see the reason why that was important is the way I've referenced these is with this little % sign, means it's looking for an item with that unique name inside of this scene. Okay, so for all three of those, at least, we need to make sure that they are accessible by unique name. Okay, so there we go. Let's do this one more time. Let's walk up to him, and you'll see his animation change. Right now, he's floating, but he should change to the attack animation where he starts scribbling. There we go. And it ended really quick. If we look at our attack state, this one, then we can see when we start, we set the timer, the duration, I mean, to the animation length. And we're going to have to change that. Okay, so we're going to have to decide how long this takes. And so for this attack spell, I think what we're going to do is let's export a value for that. So let's make an export variable, and we'll call this cast duration, maybe. I'll just set it to 1 second by default. Okay, and then we do need to export one other thing, because if we're going to cast a spell, we need a way to reference this. And how we're going to build this spell is we're going to build a new scene that we can instantiate. Okay, so I'm going to export a variable. We'll call it spell scene. And I think I want this to be a packed scene. I don't know. We may need to adjust this. I'm not sure, but I think this is good. I think otherwise we could do like scene path, I guess. Like we could just make this a string. But if we do that, though, we need to make sure that we do like export file. Let's do this, actually. This will be better. Export file. And then what we'll do is we need to put a filter in here, and we'll do star.tscn like that. That's actually probably better. I've changed my mind. Okay, we'll do that. And we'll do the loading when we need to. Going back to the attack, we have this duration being set here, and then we do this other stuff, right? What we need to do is we need to maybe override that. So this is in the enter function. We don't have any awaits in here, which is good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to attack spell, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to say func_enter. And then I'm going to call super, so that it will still call all of that stuff like it did previously. Did I spell it wrong? Oh yeah, no underscore. How about that? Okay, there we go. So we'll call the enter function. And then after this, what we're going to do is we're going to say duration equals cast duration. Okay. Very good. Very good. Now, likewise, we're going to have to do some other modifications, I think. We've got an exit. That's fine. Timer. This physics update is probably all fine as well. And I think that's good. I think that's good. You know, we might not even need this. Maybe he just does this however he wants, but there's a lot of different ways we could do the duration. I think he could be doing that scribe thing the whole time he's casting the spell, or which is what I'm building, or alternatively, he could do it for a certain amount of time and then the spell flies out. Okay, this is going to be kind of like he instantly starts casting the spell and it takes currently 1 second or whatever we assign. Now, the only other thing we need to do right now is on enter, we need to handle this spell scene, but we don't actually have that yet. So let's build the scene for the spell. Okay, so here in the Doom Scribe folder, I'm going to create a new scene, and we'll call it, I don't know, Doom Scribe Curse, maybe. Now, let's see. This is going to need a sprite, 2D. We've got this ability right here. So I'm just going to assign this here. Okay, so this is the ability that's going to play back, and it's like this cool animation of something being drawn and then these spikes. So what is this? Is that 7 across? Yeah, so I guess this is like 7, right? What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. Okay, 6 by 5, just like the boss maybe. And I'm going to go ahead and add an animation player, and this is going to be straightforward. we'll make it the default animation. I'm going to set this animation to autoplay on load. No looping. I'm going to set this to 0.1 as I do. And I don't know how long this animation is. So I'm going to drag the playhead out real quick. Just select the sprite and let's just key these frames out. Yeah, create. How many is that? Did we decide it? I don't know. I didn't do the math. 6 times 5, 30 frames. Okay. Looks like it ended right here at 2.8 seconds. So I'm going to make this 2.9 and let's play this back. Okay, there we go. I like that. I'd like to slow down the spikes a little bit and then make them fast at the end. So like when it gets to here, then I'm going to just adjust this a tiny bit. So I'm going to drag this out like that and then like that. And then I'm going to set this to 0.05 and I'm actually going to start bringing these in like so. And then it still ends at right about there, 2.9. Okay, let's try that. Okay, that's a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and save that. So this animation is going to play as soon as this node is spawned. So let's go ahead and just throw one of these into the playground real quick. And let's just make sure that it does. So if I drag this cursor out right there, can't see it now because, it does not stand out on the night sky very well. A little bit of an issue. Let's go ahead and maybe modulate this sprite so that it stands out a little bit better. Obviously, if this were designed knowing that the level was dark like this, then maybe it would have been done with different colors. I'm going to just modulate it with 2 on the eye. And it stands out a little bit better. Okay. So there we go. We've got a little animation. We need to put a script on this. Really how I want this spell or this curse to work is I want this scene to be fairly independent. I don't really want the enemy to have to keep track of it or his state for that matter. He'll just spawn one of these and it'll stick to the player. And then once the time is up, it'll either deal damage to the player or in the case where we'd kill the enemy first, I would like this to destroy itself before it can deal damage to the player. Okay? Okay, so let's see, what did I say? Let's go ahead and attach a script to this. So I'm going to go say attach script, give it a name. I had this set on built in. I don't want that. There we go. And then it's automatic. Okay, good. That's better. Create. Okay. And this is all good. Let's see. I'm going to let the timing happen based off the animation. And then what I'll do maybe is we'll need a function for when the animation is finished, and we can connect to that animation finished signal for that. Or maybe really what we want to do to damage the player is like just maybe put that, make a little function we can call. Let's just do that. Let's say func damage player. And we can export a value for the damage, or we can hard code it. I'm just going to hard code it right now. And I'm going to say it's 10. I don't know. Whoops, that's a float. Equals 10 maybe. How about that? Okay, so there we go. So when we damage the player, what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if we can find the player. So I'm going to say variable player equals null. I'm just going to build this in a safe fashion in case for some reason there's no player when this happens. So then we'll say player equals get, let's see, what is it? Get tree dot first node, get first node in group, right? And then we'll say if player, then we can say player dot, what is it? Take damage on damage taken. Oof, we need an attack area, do we? No, let's not do that. Well, let me look at the player, actually. Let's figure this out. What's the best way we want to handle this? What are the functions we've got? We might want to use an attack area, which actually would be easier. Let's see. Okay, fine. I'm going to change how I'm implementing this. Let's go back to our Doom Scribe curse. And you know what? Which means this is simpler. Really, all we need to do is have an attack area that we activate. And because of how this is going to work, it's going to be kind of overlapping the player. But let's just add that attack area. It needs a collision shape. And of course, that needs a shape as well. Okay, that should work. Let's give this the damage we want. And of course, I'm going to just turn these off. How does the attack area work? Does it disable itself on ready? Yeah. Yeah, it should be good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, so this script can just take our attack area and say dot activate. And that's fine. We'll just let it do its default. And there we go. So that should damage the player. Let's make sure this attack area is configured to damage the player and not the enemy. It needs to be on. It needs to mask for the player layer. And then we should be good. Okay. Now let's go ahead and just go to our playground. And we've got one of these here. Yeah, that's it right there. So I'm going to just drop this down here where the player spawns. And then let's go back to our Doom Scribe curse. Where is it? There we go. And this is set to play. What we need to do is in our animation at the moment we want it to damage the player, we need to add a call to this damage player function. So that's going to be like right here somewhere. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to add a new call method track. And we'll call a method on the Doom Scribe curse. And then we can insert a key right there and we'll do damage player. Okay. So it's going to call that function, you know, right when these spikes go out. Okay. And you can see while I had it paused here a second ago, I actually updated the animation just a little bit. Okay. Let's see if this works. It should damage the player. Okay. It works. Now, another thing we want to do is we want this to, maybe when it's done, we'll still connect to the animation finished. So I'm going to grab our animation player. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to use onReady variables. I'm just going to drag these in. We'll say animation finished dot connect on animation finished. We'll make this function here. And this passes the animation name. I'm not going to worry about that. So I'm going to give it an underscore. And then what we'll do is we'll just queue free. Okay. So now this should get rid of itself once it's finished playing. Cool. Now, here's what we do want to do, though. I do want this to be kind of a child of the player so that it's just nested under that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say variable P, I don't care what it is. It could be a node 2D. And I'm still going to do this get first node and group and find our player. Okay. If we have a P, then we'll make this the child. So we'll say reparent is this function we want. Let's see. Let's look at this. New parent node is going to be P. Okay. So reparent is really handy. It'll remove it and make it a child of whatever you put in there. Okay. So going back to this script, we're probably going to have to adjust the position of some things in here for it to look right. But right now we're going to make it a reparent it to the player. And then if not, then we could maybe queue free it as well, because then maybe we don't want it if there's no player. So let's see what happens here. Oh, you know what? We probably didn't have a player when this was called. It was probably ready too soon. Ah, get off of me. Get off of me. Get off of me. No, no, no. Can I kill that guy? I can. Okay. Okay, let's do this. We need to just take this full circle because obviously having one of these just in the world, in the playground, is not the right way to test it. Okay. So let's go back to our Doom. I'm going to put the Doom Scribe right down here so he's kind of ground level. Yeah, I want to move my player spawn here. Okay, there we go. So going into our Doom Scribe, we've got this attack spell. Let's go ahead and put this curse scene right here. Okay. So now what we should be able to do is when this starts or whenever we're ready, we can instantiate this. So I'm going to say This can be anything. I'm going to just say it's probably a node, right? So variable spell equals, and then we're going to instantiate one of these spell scenes. So I'm going to say load, and then we want to do our spell scene dot instantiate. Can I do that? Yeah, I think that'll work. It's highlighted right now because unused variable, right? But we could give it an underscore and it would not worry too much about that maybe. But what I'll do is I'm just going to just say get tree dot root. Can we do add child to the root? Let's see if this works. I don't know. That works. There we go. So we should see one of these, and because of its script, it should parent to the player, maybe? Oh, I'm not seeing it. Did this happen? Okay, it did do that. Let's open up our Doom scribe curse, and let's go to the script here. And say found player, just in case. Make sure we know that this is working. Oh, okay. Found player test. Okay, I see what's happening. So this line that I added here, we probably don't need that. So we'll just say, just like this. I don't know if, I think this will work. Let's give this one more whirl and see if it is going to reparent to the player. Huh. I don't see it. Well, this is just interesting. We've got a weird conundrum because before I add it to the tree, it's not working. But if I don't add it to the tree, then it's not working. Let's do this. We'll just do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say this part here, I'm going to just remove that. We should have a player, right? So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to assume that we've got a player. So I'm going to say, we'll get our first node and group. We'll just do this code in here. We'll get our player. And then we'll say p.addChild. And then we're going to add the spell. Okay, ready? Oh. Oh, did I do this wrong? Player.addChild spell. Oh gosh, I already added. Okay, you guys, I'm getting ahead of myself. We don't need to add it here. We need to add it just right there. Let's try this one more time. I swear. Okay, ready? There we go. It's there. It's in the wrong position, but it's there, and it damages the player. Very good. Okay, 2 of those, and we're gone. This is good, though. This means this is working. So theoretically, you could make this spell so that it instantiates like maybe where the enemy is, and then it just is like it's like a projectile and it just flies in a straight line. There's lots of things you could do. And I would probably I would like to build this spell so that it's kind of as self-contained as possible. And so here's what I'm going to do, actually. I'm going to go ahead and undo this. I'm going to go back to the scene root. I'm going to do one more thing because I'd like it to be very simple. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, instead of this adding it as a child of the scene, I'm going to say enemy.addSibling. I'm just going through all sorts of things here, aren't I? Let's add the spell as a sibling of the enemy. And then what we can do is we can come over here to our scribe curse. And instead of on the onReady function, we've got I think an enter tree. Now here is where we can get our player and maybe assign this as a child of the player. Let's see if this works. Okay, let's see if this works. The same effect. Oh, that crashed, didn't it? Interesting. Await. It's just a way to process frame. I'm not sure why that crashed. We probably also need to reposition this, I guess. This is actually okay because this is something we needed to do. So I'm going to just say p dot position. And we're going to make a new vector 2. Let's go 0 and then negative 32. So it's up 32 pixels. We might need to adjust that. I really hope this is working. Oh, nice. Not P though. How about self? There we go. It's working. Okay. Move that up a little bit. Maybe negative 48. And then I'll just kind of review what I've done here. I've not been explaining it. I've just been kind of going to town. Okay, that's just about perfect placement. Okay, so here, what do we do? I wanted this to be generic because I don't, we had this assuming that we're going to add this spell as a child of the player, but that might not be what we want the spell to do. Okay, so the spell needs to be responsible for that. All this is doing is adding the spell as a sibling of the enemy, which is probably going to be sufficient for most things, okay? We may also want to maybe do one other thing where we can kind of say like spell dot global position. We could position it by the enemy right there. That's going to be a good exercise for you guys to figure out. But what we've done here then within the curse is we said, okay, let's wait for it to enter the tree. Let's wait a frame, and then let's move it to the player. Okay, is what we're doing there. So we're reparenting it to the player, and we're adjusting its position so that it's on the player. Okay, so what else do we need to do? One other thing I think I want to do is I want to find, let's see, let's take this here. And I think this would be good to build like a default class that's called spell that has certain functionality built in that it is always assumed. Okay. But because we're doing a quick implementation, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say function, and then I'm going to say set enemy, which is going to require an enemy. Okay, and then what set enemy will do is I'm just going to keep a reference to it here or do something with it. In this case, I'm going to say e dot was killed dot connect. And then we'll just on enemy killed or something like that, right? We'll make this function. Now, I believe this was killed. Yeah, it doesn't emit anything with it. Okay, so let's go back to the curse. Okay, so if the enemy was killed, then we can queue free this. Okay, that means that's a way for us to get out of taking damage from this curse. Now, in order for this to work, though, we need to call that. So I'm going to go back to my attack spell, and I'm going to just do a check. I'm going to say if spell has method. There we go. Right? And what did we call it? Set enemy. So we'll do a check. Do you have this function? And if so, we know we can call it. Then we'll say spell dot set enemy. And then we just need to pass in the enemy like that. Okay? This is kind of a cool little thing. I wouldn't recommend doing this like every frame on something, but when we instantiate a scene, it's probably perfectly fine to just call this once. But this way, it allows us to pass that enemy in and keep reference to it so that within this curse, we can do this, right? We need to know if he was killed. So we should be able to now kill this enemy. Oops, I need to come over here. Haha, the curse went away. I didn't take damage from it. So, let's just run this one more time. I'm gonna clear out some of these other enemies just to get them off my tail here. And I don't want this guy to see me if I can avoid it. Oh, okay. He's still cursing me, except I'm on the other side. And he's gonna kill me with this one if I don't stop it. Cool. I think the only thing we haven't done with this Doom Scribe is he's not really facing us. Well, I'm not going to worry about changing the direction now. I think it generally works. But now you can see how, I mean, I just sat here and fumbled through it a little bit, but with these tools, it's really not too difficult to make new types of enemies, okay? So right now in my game, I've got a few different types, and they've got various forms of dynamic movement, and a spell that we can cancel out. You know, obviously, if you just had like a fireball, that would be even easier than that curse, because you just make something that has a constant velocity in one direction, and you could have that be what spawned from the enemy, and then you could use that set enemy thing in the fireball. It could say, okay, well, I'm going to take my enemy and I'm going to place myself wherever he is, you know. And maybe you need to do more like a target and stuff like that. Really, we didn't use the spell to its fullest potential. In fact, now that I say that, that would have been an easier way to get that to target the player, is maybe every spell gets assigned a target, and then once it initializes, it uses that target information to determine whatever it needs to: directionality, position, reparenting, etc. But that's going to be it for this video. Now, I'm treating this kind of as basically the final episode of Chapter 5 with the enemies and the AI. And so if you want to take this further, I think it's really on you to do that at this point and kind of, you know, figure out what it is you need to build and how you want to build it. There are a few other enemies that I really loved from the enemy design showcase, like the vertebrae and the tree stump. What was the tree guy called? I can't remember what he was called. But I may revisit those at some point, and certainly with that vertebrae, I'm thinking of the ladder functionality, because I want to implement that as well. If you guys remember, the vertebrae was the enemy where you could climb up its spine when he went down into the ground. And so I'll be looking at those, but otherwise I'm going to be prepping and working pretty hard on the next chapter, Chapter 6, which is our boss battles. And I have planned 2 bosses that we're going to build, and they're going to represent 2 different styles of building a boss and how you might implement that in a game. And I hope that it will give you guys inspiration and ideas on how to execute your own enemy bosses in your own games. So thank you for watching. I hope you've learned something new. Please subscribe if you haven't and you want to see what's coming next, or give the video a like to support me. And of course, always drop a comment in the comments below and let me know what kind of enemies you guys are making and what kind of challenges you're running into, or what kind of states or decision engines you're building. So thanks again for watching, and as always, we'll see you next time.